Okay, you're recording.
All right, so good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our November meeting of the NFBPA Mid-Florida chapter. We want to welcome all of our NFBPA members and friends to this discussion. Our agenda for today, as you know, we will adjourn no later than 1 p.m. today and try to maintain our schedule here. But our agenda for today, we're going to cover the topics that you see here on the screen. Of course, I'm here to welcome and introduce you to the Mid-Florida NFBPA chapter. But we will also conduct a little business with Roundtable Discussion, who is our chapter vice president, covering some volunteer opportunities and reminding you of forum, as well as Jaleesa Harris, our university and college relations chair, will announce some NFBPA scholarship related information. And then Lorenzo Williams, our immediate past chapter president, will cover our upcoming process for chapter elections. And then we will get into the meat of our conversation today, which is a roundtable discussion, really a continuation of a very good conversation that we all started back in September. And we will adjourn, as I said, no later than 1 p.m. So with that, we'll move forward on the agenda and have Ralphetta move into the NFBPA business and announcements.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome again, as our president has said, to our November meeting. We are glad you are here. As we have in our past meetings, we want to make you aware of volunteer opportunities with our local Mid-Florida chapter. Of course, the Finance Committee, Kiana Martin is the chairperson of that committee, and I know she is excited and anxious for those that are willing to serve in a capacity working with our finances and with our budget as we move into our 2022 service year. Our program committee and community services chaired by myself, and I work with Jaleesa Harris and Yolanda Triplett in that process. We have a new committee member that will be joining us for the first time tomorrow in our meeting. So if you are interested in serving on that committee, please send me an email and we will get you connected with us for our meeting tomorrow morning in order to discuss our plans for our December meeting and our community outreach project. Along with that, we have the membership committee. Shavela McFarland is the chairperson, and Shavela has quite a bit of experience working with membership and new members. And so we are excited to have her in that role. And I know she too is excited to welcome new persons to the committee. Communications committee, Carol Clark, and they have been working feverishly on establishing our organization website. You will see that roll out in the next 30 days with a lot of wonderful information available on the website, as well as the constant contact materials that they send on a monthly basis. And then our university college relations committee is chaired by Jaleesa Harris, and Jaleesa is doing a phenomenal job working with the folks at University of Central Florida, in particular at this time, to try and bring some additional new public administrators to the table as they matriculate at the universities in our area. So we thank Jaleesa for that connection and for her diligent work in keeping us connected to the next generation of public administrators. And these are all opportunities for any of our members to serve, and we would welcome your willingness to step forward and say yes in some of these roles. Lorenzo, if you'll. And on that note, Forum 2022 is going to take place this coming spring. I'm not sure if it'll be spring in Grand Rapids, Michigan, but on the calendar, it will be spring. So we're asking that you save the date for Forum 2022, Prisms of Possibilities. And if nothing else during this pandemic, we have learned how to take, as the old saying goes, lemons and make lemonade. And I've actually figured out you can also make lemon pie and several other things, and maybe even use it on a wound if need be. So we've taken what the pandemic has given us and been very creative in use of our resources and our available equipment and materials. And so this forum in 2022 will be an in-person forum. It will be an opportunity for us to talk about where we are and what we can learn from each other and what we have learned during this time. March 30th through April 3rd, 2022. I've looked at the agenda. It looks very exciting. And at this point, I will say again, it is planned to be in person in Grand Rapids. So we have until the end of January to do our early bird registration. And some of us are waiting just till after the holidays to see what the pandemic is doing, but we are planning to be there this coming spring. And hopefully we'll see many of you there with us. I apologize, somebody's trying to get to my house to deliver something. So if you have any questions about the forum or about the opportunity, we may have something really exciting for our December meeting to offer to some young and up and coming administrators in that light. So stay tuned for more details of what the Mid-Florida chapter is going to offer for us to be able to have some of our membership attend Forum 2022. Were there any questions on either of those? And if not, then I will turn it over to Jaleesa to talk about some potential scholarship opportunities.
Right, thank you, Ralphetta. So on that note, at the same forum, we have two things coming up. One is the research poster competition, as well as the scholarships for students. And the deadline for both will be Monday, January 17th at 11:59 p.m. So don't be late. If you are applying for the scholarships, you are not eligible for the poster competition. So just keep in mind which one you want to apply for. Both, I think, have a monetary gift at the end. So whether you receive the scholarship or if you win the poster competition, I was one of the winners for the 2019 research contest. It's a great opportunity, and I encourage you all, let me know if you have any questions or reach out to someone else in the chapter for assistance. Thank you. And I think.
Thank you, Jaleesa. Appreciate that. And now we're going to ask Lorenzo Williams, our immediate past president, to talk about our upcoming chapter election process.
Thank you. In November of each year, the president appoints a nominating committee. The nominating committee is responsible for coordinating the processes and procedures and methodology as it relates to electing new officers. I just want to make one quick comment that the committee is in the process of being appointed. In December, the nominations will be received according to our bylaws. The ballots will be distributed as planned during the month of January 2022. And in February, the ballots will be due. And then, of course, in April of next year, our officers will take office. The officers that are up for election are specifically the president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, parliamentarian, and historian. So I just want to encourage everyone, as we know that the officers and stewards of our organization are ambassadors, and they actually represent the concerns and viewpoints of all of our members, and they're responsible for providing leadership and policy direction, ensuring the financial health of the organization, crafting a shared vision, and overseeing our established sense of purpose. So as a member, you can contribute to the organization as we move forward by participating in this process. Just want to make one quick comment, Madam Chair, as it relates to the nominating committee that you've appointed. According to our bylaws, the nominating committee must consist of at least 3 members of the organization. They cannot be provisional members. And when we say members, it relates to financial members that are in good standing with the national organization. We have solicited volunteers for the nominating committee. And I want to report that we still have an opportunity for someone if they'd like to be involved. So if you will immediately send an email to the chapter website, or you can call me. My direct number is 407-836-4290. 407-836-4290. If you're in good financial standing with the national office and would like to participate in the nominating committee, please contact me in an immediate time frame. I can tell you this will be painless. We don't ask for your firstborn and require you to take us out to expensive dinners or anything. It's a painless, fun process. We have established a framework, and we just need to make sure that we follow the guidance that's provided in our bylaws. So I solicit, if you're interested, please contact me right away to be involved in the nominating committee. Actually, we plan to hold a committee meeting this afternoon at 3:30. So you need to contact me quite quickly so that I can get some information out to you to participate in that meeting. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Lorenzo. And I will echo Lorenzo's call for anyone who has an interest either in participating on the nominating committee itself. And I will certainly be joining Lorenzo in that process. Or if you have an interest in a leadership role within the organization going forward, please make that be known as well so that we can incorporate you into that process. So thank you. We are really excited about what the future holds for NFBPA. We have a lot of energetic members and with great ideas on the table. And as we roll out of this pandemic, I think we will have the opportunity to do even more than you've seen us implement over the last year. So looking forward to everyone being engaged in leadership capacities or certainly in joining one of the committees. And you just heard about the committee chairs. Joining one of those committees and putting your hand in there to support our efforts going forward. So thanks again, and we will move forward to our next agenda item. I want to remind everyone that, first of all, I think we are all aware, and if we aren't, I'll just reiterate NFBPA's mission, which really is on a national scale and certainly here locally to create opportunities that advance those of us who are in the public sector, create those opportunities to advance in our roles as leaders within our communities. So our objective is obviously to be as supportive as possible from a professional development perspective to each and every one of our NFBPA members and friends. And back in September, many of you all were on our Zoom meeting then where we had a what we call a roundtable discussion on the topic of community, leadership, and you. And it was such a good conversation that we ran out of time, and our commitment back in September was that we would come back to this conversation and continue it. So for today, that is precisely our purpose. We want to continue the conversation about community, leadership, and you. And really, our purpose here is to really leverage the collective experiences and expertise of all of us who have joined on the Zoom today. We all come from varying backgrounds. We're all at various stages of our public sector careers, whether we are in college, soon to transition into a public sector profession, or whether we are, I'll just use the term seasoned, or perhaps seasoned and soon to transition out of your public sector career into retirement. We all are in various levels, and we all have the opportunity, I think, to learn from one another's experiences. So this roundtable is intended to be an opportunity to exchange information on some of those key discussion questions that we started our conversation around back in September. So I will just say I would encourage very candid participation. in today's discussion and what I call authentic reflection on your specific experiences as we talk through these questions. And I believe these questions are really conversation starters. So there's no, obviously there's no right or wrong answer. They're conversation starters to get us all thinking about the topics at hand. I would ask if you have the ability and feel comfortable, please share your camera. It's always easier to talk when we can see a face, but I certainly recognize that that's not always possible, as we are in many cases multitasking or don't have that video capability at the time. So in any event, I want to go ahead with kind of that background and remind you of what we talked about a bit last time. Next slide. So around the topic of communication, you all may remember that one of the questions that we discussed was an understanding of what people thought the top 3 issues were that we believed were a threat to the Central Florida community. And I think we spent a fair amount of time talking about that. And that was outside of COVID. And we heard things about transportation, about housing affordability, and just the economic divide within our community. So a number of different topics came to the table in that piece. Next. We also, under the topic of community, talked about what we as public administrators should be doing to affect change in those areas. So the topics raised, we heard some examples of what folks are doing to affect change and to move the needle in that regard. And I think we covered that topic pretty extensively. Next. For today's purpose, though, we want to start on the leadership topic. I should say continue on the leadership topic, because we did get to this question, but we were a bit rushed and didn't take the time to really, I'll say, marinate in that conversation. So I'm going to remind everyone of what the question was. The first leadership question was for you to think about your own experiences as employees, and let's talk about what are the most important characteristics or qualities of a good leader. And again, I think about my perspective as an employee, and I can point to characteristics and qualities of a good leader that have been exampled or rolled for me. And then I can see some qualities that were not the best example, and all of those are learning opportunities. So that's the question at hand. Thinking about your own experiences, what are the most important characteristics or qualities of a good leader? And then I might ask you maybe to elaborate on why. So can we take some answers to that? Just unmute yourself and join in.
I'll just make a quick comment to kind of get the conversation going. As I'm thinking about my own experiences as employees, and a good characteristic of a good leader is to step back and understand that sometimes when challenges come, that we must have to remain focused on why we are in that position. We're a leader. We are not there to gain or maintain or actually receive it's good to, if you can align yourself with an organization where your own personal desires are considered, but when you are leading others, it's the others that you have been placed in a position of a steward to lead those to a position or to a place or to a vision or to a location or some point that has been identified by the organization. So it is not your personal goal, even though you have significant input into helping develop that goal. But once the goal is established, you have a responsibility to lead those that are following you to the destination that has been agreed upon. Now, of course, a good leader recognizes that if, of course, it's leading to a dangerous spot, you come back and provide output or updates. But I'll stop there, but just kind of starting the conversation that as a good leader, you have to lead to the position that's not necessarily your personal desire, but the leaders that have been established by the organization that you have agreed upon. And if you somehow are not in agreement with that, you need to go back and make that update available.
I would simply add to what Mr. Williams said, and just add one more small caveat to it, and that is this: Another good quality or characteristic of a good leader is not to challenge your employees, but to lead them to the best experience that they can have. By challenging them, sometimes you allow the egos of the individuals to come into play. And so challenging an employee to do better is maybe a good thing, but don't challenge them in terms of how you want them to better perform, or challenge them with directions or directives. And many times employees take the directives that we give them as challenges, something that they're being told they have to do. And it is also a good opportunity. You should take that opportunity to educate when you have the opportunity. So if you set the tone as the person who really understands and is trying to simply educate, it's easier for the employees to accept it. And I'll also add one more, and then I'm going to be quiet. You yourself as a leader have to see the work that you do as not laborious or labor intensive or something that you struggle with. You need to, first of all, embrace it and enjoy it. Otherwise, you may be working in the wrong area. But once you embrace the work that you have in front of you and enjoy it and make it more of a quote unquote labor of love, then you're able to lead others. So with that, I'll be quiet.
I'll jump in also, expanding upon what both Lorenzo and Tim said. Lorenzo focused on, leading employees to the common objective of the organization. I think one way that helps in that leadership is to involve the employees in kind of establishing some of those objectives. So to the extent that as leaders, you're able to involve your employees on the front end in having a clear understanding of those objectives, and even more so in defining those objectives, I believe it makes the leadership process less challenging. And I think it encourages people and inspires people to follow if they understand, or even better, as I said, have had a hand in establishing kind of the direction of the organization, and they understand what their role is. And that role, to Tim's point, maybe isn't quite so laborious as maybe they may previously have thought it was, if they have the perspective of how it fits into the big picture objective of where we're trying to head as an organization. So that's my perspective on leadership as well. Others?
While others are getting ready, I just want to piggyback on what you just said. You kind of piqued my a thought there, because as you were referencing the fact that, and as Tim kind of also started, having your employees understand. Tim talked about educating, and you kind of added and kind of helped summarize some things that I was having go around in my mind, helping them understand. Many of people don't, you'd be surprised of the number of your employees that don't fully comprehend the big picture. And they don't really sometimes need to know everything, but at least they need to have a perspective of why that's important. Many employees may say, well, why do I need to be there exactly at a specific time? Why can't I just have 5 minutes? It's no big deal. But actually, it is a big deal if, in fact, a significant service needs to be delivered and people are calling to get that service, and the phones are ringing and no one's answering. Let's say they're constantly 1 minute late, 5 minutes late. And so people gain a perspective of that service. And if you're if you're a for-profit business, of course, the profit goes. And if you're for a government business, the perception of that agency diminishes. So understanding the scope of what you're doing, it may seem insignificant, but can you imagine the situation that we're in now? Many of these chips that we thought were insignificant that are now in short supply. Cars are not available. I mean, many entities, many pieces of significant equipment are not available just because of a small chip. So if you can imagine, if an employee is that missing chip, the whole structure, the whole mechanism is not functioning because that one small piece is there. They did not realize the significance of their portion. So as Tim mentioned, just educating and helping them understand. They may not need to know all the, understand aeronautics and be an aeronautical engineer or a scientist or something, but understanding their part and how it contributes to the greater part. So Tim, your point about education is really good.
So, Carla, I'll say, I'll mention a couple of things to allude back to one of my favorite books, which is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It sort of echoes some of the items that have already been mentioned by those that have provided a response to this. But one is to underscore the importance of vision and understanding the direction you're going in, which is beginning with an end in mind. And I think that's so important because, oftentimes as a leader, you can find yourself efficiently cutting down trees only to recognize that you're in the wrong forest. So I think that's so important. The other thing from 7 Habits of Highly Effective People emphasizes what, again, some others have mentioned, which is communication, and talking about the importance of seeking first to understand before you seek to be understood. I think that's so important as well. And then lastly, I'll talk about decision making and how important it is for us to be, as a leader, being an effective decision maker. Because I think sometimes as leaders, we continue to try to capture more and more and more information. And I think it's a definite balance between realizing when you have enough information to move and to make a generally good decision, because you're not going to always have all the information that you need in most instances. And I'm not saying moving too quickly, and that's the point of the balancing act in regards to that. And then lastly, to bridge back to my what I mentioned about communication, I also think as leaders, oftentimes we show up in the room or some show up in the room and they believe by what they say and how often they speak is a sign of intelligence and leadership, when in fact, oftentimes, in my opinion, listening is probably the most important element we can bring into the room as leaders. And so knowing that it's always not necessary to speak, but to learn to speak when it's necessary.
Those are all good. Thank you. Thank you. Any other perspectives? In our last conversation, I know a lot of people threw out just kind of adjectives as qualities. I remember things like compassion as an important characteristic of a leader, vision, and Anthony already referenced that. Others? Anyone else want to chime in before we move on to the next question?
I can add something in. In regards to compassion, the jobs I do hold are as a student. So I really appreciate when my supervisors acknowledge that before I'm an employee, I'm a student. Sometimes I try to get my schedule right, but I'll forget that I have like this meeting I have right now. I technically am working, but my supervisor's like, don't worry, go to the conference room, like you're fine. And so like I have those hiccups, but they know like I am a good employee, I'm a good student. So like them being compassionate with like my time and like working with me, I really appreciate that.
I'll also
Thank you,
throw
Bernice.
in,
That's a good point.
sorry, I was speaking over you. I'll also throw in that I was thinking of the adjectives as well. And I think that the trust, that can go in line with what Lorenzo was kind of mentioning, and like, you need to know where you fit in this wheel of this big picture. But also, if you don't have like a basic trust and reliance with your immediate supervisor or staff, you are not going to be as you're not going to care as much when you make that call in, and then like Lorenzo was saying, now our whole supply chain management is, we're lagging because you simply just don't have the understanding or maybe even trust in the fact that I'm trying to I'm trying to keep things going here. So just I think a basic trust and building a work relationship with each individual is very important because everybody does not communicate the same. They're not going to understand what the process is the same. So, and finding that trust is probably going to be difficult for some, but if you have a natural building relationship with someone, not a big deal. But it may take work. It may take additional work, and that's what the hard job of leadership is.
Thanks, Danielle. Any last comment on this one? Anyone else? One last
I
comment?
placed a couple of thoughts in the chat, Carla, because I have a little bit of a crisis happening on this side. So I'm listening and trying to.
Got it.
But I think
And Ralph Feder referenced empathy and flexibility, learning to pivot.
learning to
Great.
pivot. And sometimes, our staff are not, what do you do when folks get disgruntled and unhappy? And how do you deal with those kinds of issues? So being able to be empathetic, to hear those concerns, and then to balance that with the realities of what they think can be done with what can actually be done. And a lot of times people see an end product and think that that happened overnight. They don't know the 6, 10, 12 months of work that may have gone into that project to make it work. So but I see you do this all the time. What's the problem? And I'm like, yeah, but you don't know how long it took to get to that final product. So being able to communicate very well and manage those expectations.
Great, excellent, thank you. So let's move on to our next leadership related question. And this one, we didn't get a chance to talk much on. Aside from pay, how is it that leaders inspire and motivate employees, especially during challenging times such as these? And to me, we just need to think about ourselves. What is it that inspires and motivates us? So this is the question. And this, I'll just say before anyone chimes in, this is a really good question for now, given the economic market that we're in and the challenges with workforce. Certainly people are clearly motivating folks with pay right now, but there are so many other things that people value as important right now. So I'm curious what you all think about what inspires and motivates you.
So Carla, I'll start. I think the whole idea of understanding that our ability to influence and impact through our service. When you think about throughout this time in the pandemic, the services that we provide to those in the community had to certainly continue. I mean, we had ways of being very innovative and finding out how to be able to do that. Many times people take those things for granted. And so it became very incumbent upon us to figure out ways to keep the operations going and flowing during this time. And so I think that's really just very important because it just has to be there. Because, as people expect things, but there has to be what I always call that invisible hand that's making it happen. And so we became a part of that whole invisible hand of doing those things. And so seeing that even when it's hard, we don't get to option out, if you will, to be able to keep going and flowing. So we have to have that self-inspiration, that self-motivation, and let that flow down to those that we're charged with caring and taken care of.
And this is Andrea. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll say for me and the team that I work with here over at Corrections Fiscal, one of the things that we had did is that we were any goals that we may have set, similar to what Ms. Yolanda was talking about, that we set certain goals so that it kept everybody motivated. What was their plans for that particular week or for that month? What do we have set up for our agenda that we had to complete? And as we went through that process, we continued to update each other. We made sure that if someone needed assistance during that time, we were compassionate, depending on certain situations people were having with their families. I had, staff coming in that same day, coming in and may say, may I leave early because I got to take care of this regarding my family. And we would jump right in and say, no problem, we can cover this when you come back. And so I'll say for me, just setting certain goals of what we wanted to accomplish and actually completing those, achieving them. And then when we did have some of those challenges, come up with different ideas or solutions in order to still get to the end goal. And I'll say and then once we do, we celebrate. I'm a big celebrator. I'm good at wanting to cheer people on. And I think that really helped my team quite a bit over here with some of the things that we had to deal with.
Very good. Other thoughts?
I think I will add that some of this is an extension for me from a lot of things that were said in the previous question, because if you can get a bottom line of that trust and flexibility and getting some relationship building going on with a person, you'll kind of know, you'll be able to tell a little bit, maybe what may motivate them and kind of clarify those goals, as Andrea was saying, with the person. And I actually think that also we have to look at, because I fall in the millennial category, and I think that we also have to look at how those differences are reflected in the workplace, because I think that I'll add I remember being like in middle school and high school, and teachers would be saying, you should be looking at a position in government because they're going to have a bunch of baby boomers that are going to be leaving the workforce, and like all of these predictions. So it was like, you need to be ready to fill those spaces. So I think that some of the things about that maybe the baby boomer population or older or the seasoned groups may think that there's an entitlement from the millennial group. But then I'm like, well, I didn't think about it as an entitlement. I was thinking, this is what I've been told. I should be training myself, and getting those skills now so that I can fill those gaps, as time goes on. So sometimes I think it's just a misunderstanding when in those conversations can help fill some of these gaps, and they just look like there's a pay issue. You know what I'm saying? If you have to have the conversation to be like, there are some things that maybe have just been misunderstood, but if we never have the conversation about what those goals are and what you are maybe looking to do, or whatever your perspective is, can probably help keep somebody in a position.
So Danielle, you touched on a point, and thank you, about kind of thinking about millennials versus seasoned folks. So, I'm curious from everybody's perspective, what do we think are the differences between motivating millennials and motivating the seasoned? Or are there differences? So I'm curious of what everyone thinks about that. Do you think there are some hard and fast differences? And if so, what are they?
I'll quickly comment that I think that there's some differences because there's been so much research, and I've kind of read some of it, and they've talked about the differences. So it's kind of influenced my perception of it a little bit. I'm one of those seasoned workers that's been around for a while, and during my my transition through the years, a lot of the focus was on pay because it was basically survival. You were trying to build a family, you had to buy a car, a house. There were certain necessities of life that you were focused on, so pay was it. We actually, we talk about life balance now, where family has an important part. Many years ago, we did not have the opportunity to make those considerations, but this new generation does have that. So I think the benefit that there are more opportunities and there are more perspectives that are considered. I almost said tolerated, but that's not the right word. That they're actually considered and embraced. So I think that there is a difference. There are more opportunities now, where actually there were limitations. My grandmother, did not have the same opportunities that I do. I tell you the truth, and you may not believe me, I make more now per hour than my dad did for an entire week on his job. Not that I'm highly paid. Now, don't get that perspective. I want to just paint the picture. But his job, he worked in construction, and he, drove large trucks. But he supported a family. We never went lacking. We never had a mortgage on our house because he did side jobs on the weekend and supported our family through just grit and dedication. But his regular Monday through Friday job, and I used to see his weekly checks. My hourly rate now is more than that check used to be, because I would deposit those checks for him. But the bottom line is, he supported the family. We were always fed. But the bottom line is, we have more opportunities now. So these generations have more opportunity. There's more embracing. There's just, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying life changes, transition changes. Years ago, we had horse and buggy. Today, we have supersonic jets. So as life moves, things just happen. And I'll stop there.
And I tune into what.
One last comment on that?
Well, I'll just say something real quick. When anytime I have new employees that come into my team, most of the time they're over in our property unit and they're at a certain pay grade. And one of the things I always encourage them is I ask them, what is their goal within the next 5 years? And they like, well, I just started, Ms. Laurie. I'm like, but I want you to go ahead and start thinking about what are your goals, because how you set yourself up here at corrections and how you do your job, people will view you and that will go along with you. And so a couple of people have realized that when I ended up telling them, now it has actually come back to hurt them, because they didn't take into an account what I said. And now it's going to be harder for them to remove the perspective that people have upon them based upon their actions when they first came. So that's just something I just want to share, that sometimes with the, as people come in, they don't realize that you're setting the precedent for yourself and how you present yourself. And that's important for the millennials to know that, because that will go along with you wherever you go, regardless if you're old, young, that's your character.
Good point, Andrea. Thank you. Let's move on to our next question. We've got just 2 more questions, so we're going to spend 5 minutes on each of those, and then we will wrap up at 12:59. So this is focused on you. Okay, we touched a little bit on you last time, but we didn't get a chance to really delve into this. So we talked about community, we've talked about leadership, and now let's focus a little bit on you. We often hear about the term work-life balance and want to talk about what that means to you and how do you achieve it? Is it even achievable? So let's start that one.
Hey, George here.
Hi, George.
Well, I'll start on this one. As far as work-life balance, if I had to say what could, I guess, make you successful in work and personal or in life, I would say having a purpose. So, of course, and keeping that purpose separate as you go throughout your day. So, of course, when you go to work, you have a purpose, and hopefully it's a genuine purpose. It's something that helps not just ourselves, but everyone. But, at work, having a purpose, but then as soon as you're off the clock or as soon as you're off that phone and you're headed home, I think what kind of rejuvenates you in that day is having a purpose at home, regardless of what that is. I know myself, just having a family, building the next generation, that's my purpose. But whatever that purpose is, just making sure we have one as we move throughout our roles throughout the day.
Very good. Thank you, George.
This
Other
is
thoughts?
this is Juanita Beeson. I wanted to chime in on that a little bit because it is a really big struggle for me with work-life balance. And how I look at that is I have a saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. And when we spend so much time at work, and even when we're at home, we're thinking about work and reading emails and responding to emails, we're not taking the time that we need to fill our cup, to prepare us to be able to pour out and give to our staff, to our peers, to our supervisors. So for me, that balance is being able to have time set aside where I can rejuvenate and restore and fill my cup so that when I am at work, I am able to give that 100% at work.
Hey, I'll just add real quickly to this, Carla. I know we're short on time, but a couple of things. One, I think it's so important to establish goal areas for your life so that when you're evaluating your week, you're evaluating and you're planning your week, that you have distinct roles and goal areas that you're trying to bring into the full planning for that next week. And I know that might not seem like intuitive to work-life balance, but if one of my goal areas is health, so if I just look at my calendar and I'm focused on work, I need to really be very deliberate in trying to build in workout time and making sure that I'm bringing those goals into my planning for that week to try to find that balance. The other thing that I do is, because as Juanita stated, I can attest to her statement that she struggles in that area, but so do I. You know, she's a hard worker. She puts in a lot of hours. I think my team does in general, but I also struggle with that. So one of the things I do is I try to find time, because I think balance is about giving to your family, giving to yourself, and giving to the job. And so I try to find areas where I can give to the job at home, because I do have to do some work at home, while not taking away from spending time with my wife. So I'm an early riser. I get up at like 4 o'clock in the morning. She's still in the bed. So I use that time, because that time I'm not taking away from her. But then when she's up, the work goes away, and now I'm spending that time with her.
Very good idea, good strategies. I think we've all, I appreciate, you said it's very simple, Anthony, about, you know, just looking at how you've programmed your week, and you can get a sense for where you prioritize things. And you're right, we often just kind of focus in on the job and the time committed to that without thinking about all the other goals we may have in life. One last comment on that one before we move into the next question. Anybody have another comment?
I will add one more when we start talking about work-life balance. That's a tough thing for me, but what I've done to sort of balance the scale and the equation is, there are other things that I enjoy doing and I find pleasure in doing that help me to get a sense of normalcy. As an example, I like doing some light gardening, mechanical things. You know, I work on vehicles from time to time, things like that, just to clear my head, you know, so that I'm not often sitting around after work thinking about work, you know, trying to strategize how I'm going to get things done at work. I just need that as a refresher, and it helps to refresh my mind and renew my sense of who I am. So you got to do something other than what you do at work for a living, not necessarily for a living, but in life. So I'll just add that.
Very good point. I think the key, to what everyone said is really truly being intentional about it, because if you're not intentional about it, it probably won't happen in terms of balancing kind of all of those interests and needs in your life. Jaleesa said, making a schedule and turning work off when you're trying to focus on other things. I certainly could use that one.
Yeah, it's
All right,
so
let's move.
hard working from home.
It is, right? It all blends together. Okay, let's move to our last question. And I will just preface this question by saying that, you know, as we talk about NFBPA going forward, and as we set ourselves up for the next level of leadership within the organization, one of the things we specifically want to understand from the perspective of everyone out here on this Zoom meeting is, what specifically can NFBPA do to support you in your professional development objectives, recognizing that that is the primary mission of NFBPA. And though it accomplishes many other things, the primary kind of mission critical component of NFBPA is to support us as public sector professionals in our professional objectives. So just quickly, we've only got 3 minutes, but if you don't get a chance to speak, if you can even type it in the chat box, we'll be able to access it later. But can anyone give us some key ideas about how we can support you?
Hello. Sorry, I know I did not provide any feedback before, but I have been taking notes and just learning. But I think for me personally, having events like this, where people in leadership roles or people with experience are sharing their knowledge and their experience with you, I find that to be most helpful. I'm in a newly leadership role. So when you guys are on that topic about leadership and employee engagement, I was paying close attention and taking notes. And I find that very helpful. So I would just continue to have these type of open conversations.
This is Jaleesa Harris. Just to piggyback on that, as I'm representing some of the students, one thing is key is to share opportunities that your department is having. I know that with UCF and Valencia, they have a huge requirement for internships and experience just to graduate, it's not optional. And so I know that many people, you know, they want to make connections and build those relationships, just making sure you're creating opportunities in which younger people can participate in or can meet with you or offer to be a mentor or meet them for virtual coffee. Any of those things would be really, really great. And we would love to have any of you volunteer to reach out and just be a touch point for some of the upcoming public administrators.
Great ideas. Thank you. Any other thoughts? Okay, I'm just going to say that one will be an open question. It will always be a standing question that we have for you. So if you've got some afterthoughts from this conversation, please reach out to any one of us and just share that, because we want to make sure that NFBPA is meeting the needs that as an organization we are obviously commissioned to do. And so I just want to thank you for the feedback that we've gotten today. Thank everyone for your participation in all of the questions today. Very insightful. And I agree with Brandy. It is often good just to listen and hear from one another. From my perspective, I'm trying to listen to leaders who have led beyond my level of leadership, as well as for those who are just entering their professions, to make sure that I can effectively lead. And I too have a whole bunch of notes here that I've taken. So just to get us out of here on time, it is 1:00 p.m. Again, I want to thank everybody for your time. And I'm going to wish each and every one of you a phenomenal Thanksgiving season. Hope you enjoy your upcoming weekend for those who are engaging in classic activities. And we will connect back with you in December. Thank you for being here. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, you all.
Bye-bye.